because spiritual formation is so core to my ministry, I want to offer you my top 5 books, my top 5 recommendations on spiritual formation. That way, if you are interested in learning more about the depths and the joys of spiritual formation, this is for you. And I definitely want to encourage you to check out the books in this video because I am positive they will bless your socks off. Here we go. Welcome, I'm Dusty. I am the founder of The Lamp. And if you are familiar with my ministry, you know that one of my core beliefs is that believers can reclaim the Christian experience as God had always intended for his people. And one of the ways that I believe that we can accomplish this reclaiming, if you will, is through refocusing on spiritual formation. So the books that I am offering you today, these top 5 books with a bonus book at the very end, I believe these resources can absolutely help you get an understanding for what spiritual formation is and how you can apply spiritual formation to your life in a way that just helps you, absolutely helps you re-experience the joys of a relationship with God and a deeper spiritual life with Jesus Christ. All that being said, I do want to say one more thing before I jump into my recommendations here. This is not a full review of each of these books. Instead, these books are just recommendations, and I will offer you a snippet from either the back cover or the inside flap of these books because I want to keep this as short as possible, but also give you a little bit of information about each of these books as well. That way, you know what to look forward to with each of these books. One last thing before I jump in, I promise, is I want to share with you the criteria that I use for making these recommendations to you. First of all, I've read these books myself and I absolutely enjoy them and I have been so blessed by them. Okay, criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is that most of these books, I think with the exception of the bonus book at the very end, but all of these books are used as required reading in Bible colleges and seminaries. Okay, so these are good, credible books that will absolutely direct you down the path of a more intimate relationship with God and also give you greater understanding into spiritual formation. Okay, so those are my 2 criteria. Now, let's jump right into book number 1. Number 1 is The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. This book I absolutely love. I have read this book several times now, and it has blessed my socks off. Absolutely, it has. One of the things I love about this book is it not only is simple to read, it's fun to read, it's a good read, but it also gives you a very challenging breakdown of 12 spiritual disciplines that are so key and so central to the Christian life. This is what the book says. Dividing the disciplines into 3 movements of the Spirit, Richard Foster shows how each of these areas contribute to a balanced spiritual life. The inward disciplines of meditation, prayer, fasting, and study offer avenues of personal examination and change. The outward disciplines of simplicity, solitude, submission, and service help prepare us to make the world a better place. The corporate disciplines of confession, worship, guidance, and celebration bring us nearer to one another and to God. Richard Foster provides a wealth of examples demonstrating how these disciplines can become part of our daily activities and how they can help us shed our superficial habits and bring the abundance of God into our lives. Again, this is a true classic work on spiritual formation, more specifically the spiritual disciplines. And it is so good. It's such a challenging and also refreshing look at those 12 spiritual disciplines listed there. And I am confident that if you check this book out, you will be challenged to greater depths in your relationship with God through the practices listed in this incredible book. Okay, so that's book number 1. Recommendation number 2 is Militant, Thankfulness, an essential practice to experiencing a full spiritual life. Now, I know this might sound a little cliche or whatever, but this is the book that I wrote. And this book specifically focuses on the spiritual discipline of gratitude or thanksgiving. This book I wrote because I have not been able to find a book out there that gives a very detailed study on what the spiritual discipline of thankfulness is and why it's so important to God's divine design for the Christian life. Okay, all that being said, let me give you a little snippet from the back cover. Sometimes the greatest revelation comes from realizing that which is most obvious. Not the encrypted, not the hidden, not the mysterious. Militant Thankfulness presents a powerful but obvious reality that has become lost in plain sight. In his book, Dusty Dahlin illustrates one of the most important but neglected practices in the Christian life, the spiritual discipline of gratitude. Militant Thankfulness will disclose an ancient, forgotten practice that was ordained by God to help his people enjoy the heights of the spiritual life with Christ. This book will walk the reader along a path of rediscovery. It will reveal how the life-changing practice of gratitude leads to deep and meaningful experiences with God. One of the most neglected practices in the Christian life is the very weapon God has formed to destroy spiritual mediocrity. A fiercely active and militantly intentional thankfulness will lead the heart to the refreshing it desires most. Again, I am not recommending this book simply because I wrote it. Okay, I'm really not. But I am recommending this book because it really does offer a very powerful look from the Bible at what the spiritual discipline of thanksgiving is. It's so important. It has really changed my life and helped me through some of the darkest seasons of my life, and I believe it'll do the same for you, as well as equipping you with some really good information to help you along your faith journey toward Messiah. Okay, so that was number 2. Recommendation number 3 is Habits of Grace by David Mathis. Now, this book also is absolutely incredible. I love how it's written. It's just a really good book. This book really does focus into the heart of spiritual formation, not just giving you some practices, but also giving you some of the theology behind what the core tenets of spiritual formation are. Now, let's take a look at the back cover here, or the inside flap, I should say, and we can look at this book a little bit more specifically. Hear his voice, have his ear, belong to his body. 3 seemingly unremarkable principles shape and strengthen the Christian life. Listening to God's voice, speaking to him in prayer, and joining together with his people as the church. Though often viewed as normal and routine, the everyday, quote, habits of grace we cultivate give us access to these God-designed channels through which his love and power flow, including the greatest of all, joy, knowing and enjoying Jesus Christ. Again, this is a timeless work by Mathis. It is a really good read. It's a pretty simple, easy read, but it is very heavy in the fact that it really does dive deep into the very foundation of spiritual formation. That is relationship with God, being able to hear the Lord and also know what it means to have the Lord's ear. So a really good book. I'm pretty confident you will enjoy this one as well. Recommendation number 4 comes from spiritual formation giant Dallas Willard. This book is called Renovation of the Heart. This book is incredible. Okay, I'm talking to you. It's absolutely incredible. It really is. This book is a very heavy book, okay? It deals with some of the heavier theological aspects of the spiritual formation, but it does give you an incredible theological framework for what spiritual formation is. And this man, I absolutely love how this guy writes. This guy does give you a very intense, if you will, theological understanding of what you absolutely need to know about spiritual formation and all that it is. Okay? All that being said, let me read you the inside cover. As Christians, we know that we are new creations in Jesus, so we try to act differently, hoping this will make us more like Him. But changing our outward behavior doesn't change our hearts. Only by God's grace can we be transformed internally. Renovation of the Heart lays a biblical foundation for understanding what best-selling author Dallas Willard calls transformation of the spirit, a divine process that brings every element in our being working from inside out into harmony with the will of God. This fresh approach to spiritual growth explains the biblical reasons why Christians need to undergo change in 6 aspects of life: thought, feeling, will, body, social context, and soul. Willard also outlines a general pattern of transformation in each area, not as a sterile formula, but as a practical process that you can follow without the guilt of perfectionism. Don't settle for complacency. Accept the challenge Renovation of the Heart offers to become an intentional apprentice of Jesus Christ, changing daily as you walk with Him. As I mentioned earlier, I can't speak higher of this book. I absolutely love Renovation of the Heart. It is one of those books that's really full of really good biblical study, but it's also full of refreshing and challenge. Challenge in a way that will make you reconsider, I believe, or it did for me, I should say, how we live as Christians. It's so important and such a good book. I am confident that this book will probably change your life if you check it out, okay? So that was book number 4. Book number 5, here it is. Book number 5 is Spirit of the Disciplines, also by Dallas Willard. This wise and compelling meditation invites us to a new understanding that sees salvation not only in terms of forgiveness of sins, but in light of the total transformation of our lives. Willard presents a way of living that enables ordinary men and women to join God and realize their highest aspirations of well-being and well-doing. The key to this self-transformation resides in the practice of the spiritual disciplines. Willard explains why the disciplines work and how their practice affirms human life to the fullest. The Spirit of the Disciplines places solitude and silence, prayer, simple and sacrificial living, meditation upon God's word and ways, and service to others at the very heart of the gospel. We need a deeper insight into our practical relationship to God in redemption. We need an understanding that can guide us into constant interaction with the kingdom of God, says Dallas Willard. Speaking to what Willard identifies as a widespread and deep longing among Christians and non-Christians alike for a personal purity and power to live as our hearts tell us we should. This book is really neat because it doesn't just offer, like some of the other books I listed, it doesn't just offer the spiritual disciplines and offer a bit of a challenge in relation to how we practice them. But this book also kind of explains the theology behind those spiritual disciplines as listed there in that description. So it's a really good one. I love also how he ties the spiritual disciplines into the heart of the gospel. I think you'd really like how he does that, so I think you should probably check that out. You can check out the links for all of these books below. Now, as I promised, I have one last bonus book. Now, this book, I'm not positive it's being offered as required reading in Bible colleges and seminaries like the books listed earlier, but this is also just an incredible book, something that I'm very passionate about. So let me tell you what this is. This bonus book is called Hearing God by Dallas Willard. Okay, again, I love Dallas Willard. You can probably tell by my recommendations here, okay? But this book is really, really important to me because as I pastor, or co-pastor, I should say, a church out here in Citrus Heights, it's really become evident to me that that Christians really don't know what it means to hear from God and hear God when He speaks. It's a very heartbreaking thing for me, because I believe that God is not maliciously withholding himself from his people, but I believe that he is a revelatory God, right? He's a God that reveals himself and speaks to his people all the time. And the fault lies with us. We're the ones that haven't trained ourselves to hear from him. And this book really does walk you through how to hear from the Lord and how to train yourself to be able to listen for the voice of the Lord. A really good book. Let me give you the description. God spoke to me. The Spirit spoke to my heart. God revealed the ideal to me. Being close to God means communicating with him, telling him what is on our hearts in prayer, and hearing and understanding what he is saying to us. It is this second half of our conversation with God that is so important, but can also be so difficult. How do we hear his voice? How can we be sure that what we think we hear is not our own subconscious? What role does the Bible play? What if what God says to us is not clear? The key, says Dallas Willard, is to focus not so much on individual actions and decisions as on building our personal relationship with our Creator. In this updated and expanded edition of Dallas Willard's beloved book, you'll gain rich spiritual insight into how we can hear God's voice clearly and develop an intimate partnership with him in the work of his kingdom. I'm sure you will love this book, as well as every book listed in this video. They're so important to our lives as Christians, and these books really do hold some information that I think gets neglected out here in America, out here in the Western world. So I want to encourage you to check them out. You don't have to check out all of them all at once, of course, but I highly recommend these books, and I encourage you to check them out at some point in your Christian life. They really will bless your socks off. Every link for these books is listed in the description of this video. So go ahead, check them out, read the descriptions of these books for yourself, and see if one of these will work for you and where you are at in your journey of faith. I love you, God bless you, and check out that video over there.